Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr and also with Kevin Noon behind the camera because we are live here. And Tom, I'll just ask you, how's it going?
Tony, you say as always, but I don't think we've ever done a show live from beautiful Bedford, Pennsylvania. So, Tony, I'm outstanding. Did I just commit a serious violation of OPSEC by listing the town where we are right now? Will security downstairs be overwhelmed? Listen, possibly. I don't know. Well, I don't want to say which hotel we're in, Tony, but there are 2 trees involved. Sorry, that's an old Mitch Hedberg joke.
We are, I'm not going to mention where we are, but we are here. So if you want to stop by, we are in room 416.
I don't remember what room we're actually in, so I don't know. Maybe you're telling the truth. Maybe not. I don't know. This is going to be an exciting mystery. Do I need to get up and check and see whether you just...
No, don't do it now. Wait until after, wait till late tonight when we get back. We'll just have you go to the room first. But welcome to all of you as you join us. And remember, this is a Friday live show, and we've been in the car for like 4 hours. So this is about you asking stuff and talking, and not about us putting together a show. I want to get that out there right now. So feel free to throw your questions in the chat. Kevin will get to them. If assuming he's watching, he may just be surfing on the internet, seeing how the Dodgers are doing.
Much the same as yesterday. Much the same as tomorrow.
Not doing much.
Much the same as the Mets. Much the same as the Cubs.
But we do have a matchup tomorrow at noon. Is this a big noon kickoff? It is a big noon kickoff. So, Tom, do you think it's going to be a quiet crowd? This is going to be an interesting situation. It's always the best atmosphere. It's the one atmosphere that everybody talks about when you ask anybody in the Big Ten who has been able to play in a whiteout. So you don't ask an Indiana guy, you don't ask an Illinois guy, you ask a Michigan person or an Ohio State person. They say it's always the best environment. So where's this going to rank tomorrow as a noon kickoff?
Yeah, it feels like, if you've been to Ohio State for a night game, big night, not like, oh, look, they're playing Toledo at night for some reason, a big night game. Those have there's just a certain amount of pomp and circumstance, and also people have had all day to prepare. Mm-hmm. If you're listening as a podcast, I'm doing air quotes when I say prepare. You get a certain level of atmosphere that just, it doesn't, and that's from, the fireworks and all that stuff, all the way down to crowd noise. It doesn't, you can't quite get there on a noon game, but there have been some loud noon games in Ohio Stadium when they're playing a big opponent. The Oregon game last year was loud.
Yeah.
Michigan games at noon are always loud. So I think you're still going to have, it will not quite be the whiteout environment, which is kind of a little bit of a, stand off by its own. They did that last week. It won't be that, but I think it's going to be the most hostile atmosphere this Ohio State team has faced all year, and at least since last year at Michigan. And outside of that, most of the guys in this team haven't really seen an atmosphere like that outside of last year's Michigan game.
Tom, what is Penn State's record at home on noon kicks against top 10 teams?
Since when? Because they've played a long time. And which poll, Tony? Because AP poll versus coaches poll.
Only since 93 UPI.
Since 93 UPI.
So it's 1 year.
I was going to say, so I don't think they played anyone top 10 that year at home. So I think it's 0-0.
Well, then first time for everything. Finally get a top 10 team here.
Is Ohio State in the UPI this year? Top 10?
Yes, Tom, they are. Yeah, so I'm just, is this a 3:30 atmosphere in Ohio Stadium as you try to compare them? I do think, and I said this on several shows we've done this week, if Ohio State comes in thinking they can let down because this isn't a whiteout, I think they're going to be sorely mistaken, and they have to recalibrate their plan of attack in terms of, I don't know how you plan to attack your attitude towards a crowd, but maybe you should. Just prepare for a very loud thing. Mm-hmm. And then if it's not as loud as you thought, then you're already ahead.
And I'm sure they've been practicing with crowd noise all week. That's just sort of standard operating procedure they do that when they go to Indiana.
Mhm.
So this is not just a Penn State thing.
You think Quinn Temple is like roaring into the microphone during the game as well, during practices as well?
Oh man, and he's probably singing the same like 5-second snippet from The Lion King. Just prepare yourselves for it. You're used to you've probably built up enough of a callus to the stupid lion roar thing that you will hear 342 times during a game, and you're going to hear Zombie Nation 10 times. I think that's Kraftwerk, I believe, German techno band from. I'm openly speculating.
Wow, you spent 4 hours in a Volkswagen one day, and you're already talking German techno. Look at you go.
Anyway, so you're gonna hear the lion roar. You're gonna hear the same 3 songs that they play all the time. But now this year, if you have not watched a Penn State game at home, they're playing the start of a song from The Lion King, and it's like it's just a 5-second clip. So you're going to get that exact thing stuck in your head. Yoenis Cespedes used to use it for his walk-up music when he was bad at even playing for the Mets as he was going up to hit, and everyone's like, "This is awesome." I was like, "Is it? It feels different, but I don't know if it's good." And you're going to hear it even more than that against Ohio State. I think it's like they're almost replacing the Lion thing, and it is big time annoying.
I remember, I don't know, 6-8 years ago here, and somebody on the Ohio State beat, I think, was counting the number of roars, and they stopped counting in the 40s or so.
Mm-hmm. That was 2018, and we were doing that before the 2018 game up in the press box, and it was like your brain starts to tune them out at some point, and then you would like you'd hear one and go, "Oh, I haven't been writing this down for the 5 minutes, so I've probably missed a number." And you just it's
like living next to the train tracks. Eventually, you don't hear it at the airport. You don't hear the planes anymore.
Yeah,
because you have to just focus, leave it out of your brain, and then it goes away. But plenty of annoying things at Penn State, not just sounds, but the smells.
Mm-hmm. It's like living next to the dump.
That is not true, Tom. It's a very nice place, beautiful stadium, tremendous parking for the media. Actually, that's not true either, but it's free parking, so that's cool. But the crowd, I think, will be okay in terms of handling it. The real test obviously comes on the field from the Penn State offense and Penn State defense. Of those two, and then we'll dive into that side of the ball. Which side is more dangerous to the Ohio State Buckeyes?
I think the Penn State defense, because I think the offense feels like they're going to, and we've talked about this a couple times this week, and sort of landed on the same number independently, which tells me that I'm not completely crazy here, or am I?
Let's see what Kevin has to say about his score later on.
The number that I keep landing on with Penn State is 17 points. They're going to hit a couple big plays. They'll hit a big pass at some point. They may hit a big run at some point. They'll get down, they'll have another one where they get down to the 35-yard line and they kick a field goal and they'll get 17 points. And it's like, I don't think Ohio State's going to completely shut down Penn State. I don't think Penn State's finishing with 3 points or anything like that, 6 points. But I don't think they're getting to 34 either.
Mm-hmm.
The Penn State defense, to me, if they can shut down the Ohio State rushing attack, and I think after last week, you have to acknowledge it's a possibility. I think it's going to be hard for Ohio State to be one-dimensional and really pull away in this game. I don't think they're going to be able to be one-dimensional and score 40 points because Penn State's corners and safeties are pretty good, and that's putting a lot of pressure on C.J. Stroud. And if you're one-dimensional, that makes Penn State's pass rush more effective. So I think the defense is more of a threat than the offense.
Which is kind of crazy to say, and I think I agree with you, because you have an Ohio State offense that is 1 or 2 in a nation, depending on whether, which week they play a good offense or defense and which week Tennessee does. Like they're kind of going back and forth, those two. But you look at that Penn State defense and the Ohio State offense scoring 50 points a game, you would think, well, clearly a defense isn't a threat against that in terms of shutting them down or anything like that. So surely the offense, the opposing offense would be the bigger threat. But I'm with you. Like defensively, I think there's the secondary that we've talked about. And I think I also say the Penn State defense because I don't have as much respect for the Penn State offense. And that's probably the issue. Whereas I think if you're going to beat Ohio State, the biggest threat I think has to come from the opposing offense. Because if it comes from the opposing defense, that means there's not enough offense on the other side of the ball to really get that 38 points that they would need, assuming Ohio State gets held to 35, 34, or something like that.
Yeah, and I think to me the big concern with Penn State's offense is the same thing that's been the concern with Penn State's offense for the last decade, which is, hey, their offensive line's not particularly great. And Penn State's offensive line sort of wavers between not tremendous and extremely bad, like season imploding bad. And this is not a season imploding bad Penn State offensive line. This is on the scale of the last decade of Penn State offensive lines. This is one of the better-ish ones, an above-average one. But above average for the last decade of Penn State offensive lines is still not very good. And if you can't, and with two young running backs, they're two young, very talented running backs. Ohio State really wanted Nick Singleton. I am not, I don't think I'm telling any big surprises there. Ohio State really wanted Nick Singleton. They didn't get him. Penn State got him. Katron Allen, very talented young running back as well. But if the holes aren't there, there's only so much you can do. Ohio State has been very good against the run this year. Maybe Nick Singleton busts a 60-yarder, but I don't, I have questions about whether, even if Nick Singleton has a 60-yarder, I don't know that I think Nick Singleton gets to 100 yards. I don't know that I think Penn State gets to 150 yards rushing, even with a 60-yarder mix in there. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball. So if you can't run the ball, that puts it all on Sean Clifford and the receiving unit and the tight ends. And I don't think they can consistently – I don't think Sean Clifford in a one-dimensional offense with sort of an iffy offensive line in front of him, I don't think Sean Clifford is going to be able to do enough to really get Penn State into the 30s.
Everybody knows what Sean Clifford is. Everybody they probably don't even need to watch like this year's film, Ohio State. Obviously they did, but it's like, we know Sean Clifford. We don't need to spend too much time on him. We've seen him every year. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, there's more film on those guys now. So I think you know more about them as well. So they become a little bit easier to defend. And that's the same for this entire Penn State offense. And so that makes things even more difficult for them. And then you have Jim Knowles, the Ohio State defensive coordinator, who you know more about the Penn State offense, but then you also know more about your own defense and what you can do, some things that you want to throw out there. I wonder what's been in the works for the last few weeks where Jim Knowles says, yes, I add stuff every week, but we run it for 3 weeks before we run it in practice for like 3 weeks before we call it a game, because I want to make sure that they're aware of it. And maybe against a sixth-year quarterback and Sean Clifford, that's when you start to throw some stuff at him that isn't on film yet, because he has seen everything, as Ryan Day said this week. And so I guess you want to give him some stuff that he hasn't seen, but he's also not the kind of guy that will just pick you apart. I think a simple, basic defense is enough to contain him. Now it's just a matter of, do you want to make his life miserable, or do you just want to, let's just not let him beat us? And I don't think they're going to be conservative and say, let's just not let him beat us, because that's not really Jim Knowles' way.
Yeah, Jim Knowles has been very aggressive this year. And Jim Knowles you don't generally hear defensive coordinators talking about, willingness to give up big plays. Yeah. That is, for years and years and years, we've heard Ohio State defensive coordinators and different defensive coordinators, not just like the one, but different defensive coordinators talking about, job number one is stopping big plays and not giving up big plays. Jim Knowles just kind of comes in like, yeah, well, we're going to give up 4 or 5. Like, that's just the cost of doing business. And if you're willing to play like that, yeah, you are going to give up some big plays, but also you're gonna make some big plays as well. You're able to be a little more aggressive. You're able to take, be selective in the chances you're taking. I think he's probably a little bit smarter in some of the chances that he takes, because Manny Diaz is a little bit of a gambler as well. The gambles tend to pay off a little better for Jim Knowles than they do for Manny Diaz. And, I think you're going to, that can turn you into a big play defense, both in a good and a bad way. But, it has turned Ohio State into a very, very strong defense against the run. And then once you make an opponent one-dimensional, then that makes your pass rush that much better, because it's just those guys, Ready for my Kirk Herbstreit impression?
Oh,
they're going to pin their ears back, Tony.
wow.
Get after that quarterback.
You
Tony,
said it.
And you can tell that because they have a look in their eye.
The gambling aspect. Jim Knowles gambles, Manny Diaz gambles. If they're both playing roulette, Jim Knowles is putting money on red or black. Like Manny Diaz is putting his money on a number. Like
0-0. Manny Diaz story.
So that's the different ways that they gamble in the same game. The big plays thing is interesting because what did Jim Knowles tell you when you asked him what's the first thing he looks at when it comes to watching film?
Explosive plays. He's looking for, and I asked Kevin Wilson this, and Kevin Wilson kind of was very methodical about, this and this and this and formations and downs and distance and all that kind of stuff. Jim Knowles said explosive plays. He wants to know how many explosive plays are they making? How are they making it? Where are the explosive plays coming from? That's the thing that, and for someone who's willing to give up some of those, that's kind of interesting that was his answer.
Yeah, it's like, well, I'm going to dive in. Where is the pain going to come from? That sort of thing. Like, let me know immediately what I have to deal with. And I guess maybe like when he talks about that's baked in. Like, I guess he's like looking for the ingredients at that point. Like, okay, 2 eggs here and some flour here with this play, that sort of thing. And then it's like, okay, now let's move on. I've got that. Now let's put this all in the oven and see what happens. But it was just interesting to me that he's okay with big play. Okay, this is a relative term. Okay, but it's also the very first thing he's looking at when he starts to look at an opponent. And with this team, you see there's potential for big plays. I don't have the numbers in front of me in terms of what Penn State does in the passing game, but Mitchell Tinsley is a good receiver. Parker Washington is a good receiver. They can throw some stuff out of the backfield, and they can make some plays. Sean Clifford can keep some things alive, but it always just comes back for me to the big plays are fine, but it's the third down throw that is 4 yards out of bounds or right into a defender's chest. And it's like a defense can simply just, if we force third and longs, that's all we need. And we don't even need to come after a blitz on that. On a third and long, we can and try to get the ball. But if you just, same thing with any defense that Jim Knowles or any offense that Jim Knowles face, stop them on first down, and then your success rate continues to go through the roof because it leads to a third and long, and that's when you can do whatever you want.
And you didn't mention Brenton Strange here, the tight end.
Yeah.
He's someone who is, you're just going to have to watch, like 3rd and 7. He's someone who watch for them to maybe take a
Theo
shot
Johnson
to him
as well.
Yep. Yeah. So they have weapons, but they don't have Ohio State level weapons. And I don't think that's going to be a particularly controversial take. I see some Penn State fans in the chat. And just to be clear, I mean, people are talking about Sean Clifford as a warrior. I don't think anyone doesn't respect Sean Clifford. Like, Sean Clifford is a very good, solid, tough quarterback. He has, I think there is a little bit of cumulative effect on him of playing behind a crappy offensive line for like 6 years now. And at some point that does add up. And it's just, you don't have quite as much time, and you don't have receivers who get quite as open quite as quickly as Ohio State's receivers probably will on Saturday. And that's even with Penn State having some good corners. And we'll talk about Penn State's corners in a minute. But I mean, Penn State feels like they've got the 2 receivers who you got to kind of keep an eye on, the 2 young running backs who are probably not going to have huge holes to run through. You got to keep an eye on the tight ends a little bit, but there's not a Jahan Dotson on this year's team. And that's, even when it was just the one Jahan Dotson, the last time Penn State or Ohio State was here, you weren't here, I was here. But Jahan Dotson made just an incredible play on, he had a couple incredible catches against Sean Wade. And, Sean Wade's playing in the NFL right now. I don't know that they have. Parker Washington has flashed that a little bit this year, but they just don't have quite that level of player. And so it just feels like a game where nothing is going to come too easily for Penn State. And I don't know if it's going to be easy for Ohio State on Saturday, but it seems like it's going to be easier for Ohio State than it is for Penn State.
And I think more explosive as well. And that's eventually becomes the difference. Yeah, Sean Clifford, we know him, and there's this familiarity breeds contempt kind of thing, but also you've been limited in your results with him. And We saw the same thing with Ohio State and JT Barrett. You could only go a certain limit, a certain height with him. And I think the same thing with Sean Clifford. Now he can do everything. Like he can run, he can throw, he can dissect the defense, he can diagnose what he needs to do. It's just the execution isn't always there, and that's not always his fault. That's the line breaking down. That's the receivers. That is also sometimes his fault. I think he's thrown only 3 interceptions this year, but he could have thrown 3 against Minnesota if Minnesota would have held on. And there were some rough passes in there, and that's a lot of what he provides. That's what he provides sometimes. Mm-hmm. And if you make the plays that are presented to you as a defense, I think there's going to be an ample amount of plays to be made. So it's just up to the Ohio State defense to be like, I will catch this interception. Mm-hmm. I will pick up this fumble. I will knock this pass down. I will get past this lineman. Like there's enough there to make some hay.
Well, and this does not feel like a game where Penn State has to play absolutely perfectly to win, but Penn State needs to play pretty darn well and also needs Ohio State to not play real well. And this feels like a game where if Penn State has 1 or 2 big mistakes, if Sean Clifford throws a pick 6, I think that functionally the chances of Penn State winning go to 0 at that point. If CJ Stroud throws a pick 6, that makes this a more interesting game, certainly. And we have seen some pick 6s in this series over the years, but it feels like, the margin for error for Ohio State obviously significantly bigger than Penn State. Sean Clifford doesn't have to be perfect, and he's not going to be perfect, but he probably has to play the best game of his career to have this be a game in the middle of the fourth quarter.
How many pick 6s from this series can you name right now, Tom?
Do I have to give you names and everything? Because they had 2 in 2000. Well, let's see. Let's start with Chris Gamble in 2002.
That's easy.
They had in 2006, they had 2 of them. Mm-hmm. One of them was Malcolm Jenkins. Mm-hmm. One of them was Antonio Smith.
That's correct.
McGloin threw, it felt like 7. I'm sure it was not 7. I
only really remember one more.
Okay.
Number 48 for Ohio State, I believe.
48 for Ohio State.
You're never going to get it based off that number.
Yeah, I am.
It was a Ryan Shazier wearing a tribute jersey to a friend.
Okay.
So, yes.
Yeah, okay, Ryan Shazier. And I feel like McGloin threw a few. There was a Penn State game in the late 2000s, early 2010s, where I was watching at home and started coming down with the flu at about halftime. So the second half is a little bit of a fever dream for me, and I don't know if I ever went back and watched it. It was like that, and the Sugar Bowl against Florida State was the same thing.
Oh.
Which that was. It turns out having the flu was the best way to consume that game for the Ohio State.
I think Joe Germain had the flu in that game as well. So I can't remember any of the other pick sixes, but there have been a good number, and wouldn't be shocked if there's another one way or another tomorrow. Because let's not forget, as we can move into the Ohio State offense, CJ Stroud has thrown an interception in 4 straight games,
and thrown a pick 6 against Michigan State, and had a strip sack fumble against Iowa. I mean, Ohio State's offense has been we talk about the defense being a big play defense in both a good and a bad way. Ohio State's offense has been a big play offense in both a good and a little bit of a bad way as well.
Yeah, and so it would, if you're going to stop throwing interceptions, this would be the game to do it. I see we have a super chat.
Jordan Kapler wants to know, what would these 2 offenses be like if they swapped quarterbacks? I don't think this is going to. First of all, I don't think this is going to change it as much as you might think, because you still have all the wide receivers on the Ohio State team. You still have a far better offensive line on the Ohio State team. You still have 2 veteran running backs on the Ohio State team. I mean, CJ Stroud is not the only advantage Ohio State has. CJ Stroud, while he is alive as Penn State quarterback, is, makes them better, but guys are not as open. You're running for your life a lot more. You don't have a running game you can lean on. CJ Stroud, I think, is was a better quarterback prospect than Christian Hackenberg coming out of high school. And Christian Hackenberg had a worse offensive line than CJ Stroud would be playing behind this year. But you just look at what happened with Christian Hackenberg. It was a very highly touted guy. And he just, it didn't go anywhere. And it was like the Goodwill Hunting. You just wanted to hug him. It's not your fault. It is not your fault.
No, I think the Ohio State offense would be similar to the 2016, 2017 stuff with like JT Barrett. Not that Sean Clifford would run all the time, but that kind of really good, but not as good, where you don't have the pinpoint passing. I do think there would be a segment of the population of the Ohio State fan base that would prefer it because Sean Clifford will run the ball and that will make them happy. And it doesn't matter if he's completing 56% of his passes. He ran 6 times for 13 yards and once he picked up a third down. And so it doesn't matter that they only scored 26 points in that game. He ran the ball. And so there'd be some happy Buckeye fans.
Sean Clifford versus JT Barrett. Is JT Barrett a better
yes.
Because JT Barrett had the same advantages where you had a better supporting cast. And, JT Barrett won a bunch of silver footballs and set a bunch of records. I don't think Sean Clifford is quite as good as JT Barrett. So JT Barrett versus CJ Stroud. I don't feel like that's a particularly long debate for most people either. So, yeah, it's an interesting thought experiment. I guess the more interesting question is which team changes more in terms of its offense, and in terms of its production. Does Penn State get so much better and Ohio State just gets a little bit worse? Does Ohio State get so much worse and Penn State just gets a little better?
How much worse does Penn State's running game get without a running threat and Sean Clifford? And just it's not a tremendous threat. It's enough of a threat. You take that away with this offensive line, this Penn State offensive line. I don't know that it goes all that well. And yes, you have a much better passer with CJ Stroud, but this is one of these things where sometimes the fit just isn't there. Sometimes the matchups just aren't there with this is Penn State being a better matchup for Ohio State than Michigan is, that sort of thing. Just sometimes the fits aren't there. And I don't know that CJ Stroud is a great fit at Penn State. Now they take him.
Yeah, they sure would take him. Yes. There was a great stat that Kevin put up there a minute ago, which was that 4 out of the last 5 games, Ohio State has held Penn State under 100 yards rushing, 99 yards rushing or less, 4 out of the last 5 years. It certainly feels like, gun to your head right now, it certainly feels like they're under 100 yards. And it probably takes a, 45, 50-yard run to get them to 100, right?
Yeah, I think if there's nothing over like a 20-yard run, then I don't see it happening. And it gets to the point of it also depends on the Ohio State offense. If Ohio State's up 4 touchdowns in the third quarter or second quarter, then they're going to be throwing the ball. But if it's a ball game the entire game where you can run the entire game, maybe they run the ball 40 times. And I don't know what you guys are laughing at.
There's commentary on my shirt in the chat. It's not blue. It's extremely not blue.
Right.
Listen, did I literally just throw something on this morning and get in the car and then we got to the hotel and we started this? Yes. All of these things.
If it's your Colorado national champs, national champs.
Who doesn't love the Colorado Buffaloes?
Look at Tom once again celebrating a half national championship winning team. It's disgusting. Good job on you. Go Buffs. Go Buffs. But again, the Colorado Buffaloes have a special place in this show.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
You can't.
Not a big threat to Ohio State's national championship hopes this year either. So.
No. But if you grew up in the 90s, you have to love Colorado. It's like they're one of those. They weren't good enough long enough to become this hated thing. Mm-hmm. They're always just like, oh, this is fun to watch. I like this team.
Well, and they've got the cool stadium, and the Flatirons. You've got the Ralphie. You got it is a whole thing. And even if you don't remember the national championship team, it feels like for years and years and years, the Friday after Thanksgiving at noon, you were watching Colorado and Nebraska. It was like Texas A&M, and then Colorado and Nebraska. We're always playing on that Friday. I just always associate that with Thanksgiving weekend. So, yes, sorry.
I don't know what I was talking about, Tom. Way to derail the show by reading comments about yourself. You are so into Tom.
Well, what else is there to be into on the show, Tommy? Honestly, let's be honest. I'm seeing Michigan fans in the chat here, and it brings up an interesting thought that I was having. Again, all about me.
This reminds me of this thing that I once thought.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a game where if Ohio State plays. I mean, Michigan annihilated.
Yep.
Penn State 42-17, and it was one of those like not probably as close as the score indicated games because it was 16-14 at halftime, and Michigan had like 18 first downs to 1. So it was really that game could have been you take out the 1 pick six and the 62-yard run from Clifford, and that game's 42-3. So I think there's going to be a tendency from people to look at that game and say, if Ohio State wins 35-24, say, that people will look at it and go, aha, Michigan is better than Ohio State because of these 2 games. And, if you go back and listen to our Michigan Monday episode or some of our recaps of the Iowa game, Ohio State annihilated Iowa in a way that Michigan did not. Now, Michigan had to go to Iowa City, and Ohio State got Iowa at home. Michigan got Penn State at home. Guess where Ohio State has to go? They got to go to Beaver Stadium. And I think you're gonna have people trying to make transitive victory properties games with Michigan State and Ohio State Michigan State as well. I would just caution that history would indicate don't read too much into that stuff. And I'm saying this before the game so that no matter what the results are, you can't say, aha, you're only saying that because it disagrees with something you already think. Just I don't know that I read that much into the score differential between Ohio State and Michigan against Iowa, and I don't know that I read too much into Ohio State. If Ohio State comes in and it's 72-0 against Penn State tomorrow, like, okay, we can have that conversation. I don't think it's going to be. And if Michigan beats Michigan State 72-0, like, okay, we can have that conversation. But I don't think either of those are going to happen. And I wouldn't try to parse things out where it's like, well, Ohio State beat Penn State by 3 more or fewer points than Michigan did, and here's all the things that means.
Yeah, well, Tom, I do think you need to dial these way up because there's no way to tell who's better between Ohio State and Michigan this season. So you've got to look at these the minutia, the nuances. That's how you figure these things out because, again, there's no way to know. But, yeah, like I said a few minutes ago, some teams are just different matchups for others, and Michigan was I would say an easier matchup for Iowa because they didn't feel as threatened. Not that they were trying to win. Iowa's not trying to win. They're just trying to hold the threat down. And so you have to play teams differently and allow different things and try to stop different things. And, do I expect – what did Ohio State beat Michigan State by? Was it
That
40?
Game was 3 weeks ago.
And it feels like 49 or something like that. But I feel like Michigan may also try to maybe put a 50 spot up, and this one just because of
but how often does Michigan absolutely kill Michigan State? Not
rarely.
Very often. And this is Michigan State's Super Bowl, and I think Michigan State, whatever Michigan State has, they're going to throw it into this game because if they somehow pull another one out of their wheres, that has saved. Thank you, Kevin. That changes the whole narrative around the season. That this is now the season where Michigan State heroically went into Michigan Stadium and ruined another Michigan season, and Paul Bunyan is back home in East Lansing again, and that would be 3 in a row for Mel Tucker, and then you get some real questions from Jim Harbaugh, and does Jim Harbaugh have a Michigan State problem? Like you start getting those narratives, and Jim Harbaugh has to deal with Ohio State in a couple weeks. Jim Harbaugh has other stuff he's got to worry about, but I that's one where way too often people say, "Oh, you got to throw the records out." It's Penn State and Rutgers. You got to throw the records out. Like whatever. Michigan State is one of the very few true. No. You got to throw the records out for this one.
That's why I think if they have an opportunity, they're going to try to blow Michigan State out and set some sort of a tone. Super chat.
Brian says OSU beat Michigan State 56-7 last year, and Michigan lost. Well,
there's your answer, Fishbulb.
There it is. Yes. So transitive property, always accurate.
That's right. I was going to write about the difference in the Iowa game between Michigan and Ohio State. And it's like, for one, it was going to be too much effort, but for two, it's like, well, what is it? It's not even a thought exercise. It's just thought dog work. There's like nothing good comes from it.
We have people asking if we're going to drive back tomorrow after the game. Yes, that is the plan.
Well, we're not going to drive.
Well,
Kevin
will drive.
Yeah.
That's
He'll
Kevin.
be fine. He's like a mule.
Tony will be writing. I'll be editing photos, and
we'll be listening to Michigan State on the radio.
Yes, we
listen
will.
to Michigan State on the radio. Yep.
For how many quarters, Tom?
What time does the game start?
7:30.
We will hear the whole game. We will hear.
I'm just saying, will we like after the second quarter? We'll be like, you know what? Let's find a different game.
I think what time is Kentucky Tennessee? Is that a night game? That's the only other one that I thought this week was like maybe.
But it has to be a night game because the cocktail party's at 3:30, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. So yeah, I think we're listening to that game after halftime.
Oh, wow, look at you!
I think Michigan wins, but it's a not particularly thrilling, a not particularly fulfilling 35-17 or 20 kind of game where you don't really just get to annihilate them like they want to.
Look at you picking Michigan, but not overly. Like that's a surprise for you.
Brian says you can't use transitive property with two different philosophies of football, and that's exactly right.
Well, for one, like you can't use it,
Mhm.
but for two, definitely, like different styles, different outcomes. It's like yes, a knife beats a bat fight, but then the gun could be beaten by the bat. It's the whole rock, paper, scissors, Tom. That's what I've been trying to tell you.
I always go back to last year's Michigan-Rutgers game, and Michigan looked terrible against Rutgers. Rutgers had the ball with a chance to drive for the tying, or if you score a 2-point conversion, winning touchdown in the final minute of the game. It was 20-13, and it was like Michigan couldn't do anything right all day. And that was, I think, a November game. And then Ohio State absolutely kills Michigan State. It was 49-0 at halftime and somehow not even that close. And that was a Michigan State team that had beaten Michigan. And it was an Ohio State team that had just annihilated that Rutgers team. And then you saw what happened. It's styles make fights and matchups.
Also, though, Ohio State was very sick that week and the weather was ridiculous. I just had to throw that in for the fans, the Michigan fans in the chat. They love that stuff.
They do. They love hearing all about that.
Lots of wind, lots of snow, lots of flu. Got to take that into account. But Ohio State still played the game.
Not sure what that could possibly be a reference.
I'm referring to 2020 when Michigan decided they didn't want to play game time. That's just for clarification.
SS Craddock says, Tom, just stop. If we're truly a top 2 or 3 team, we'll blow them out. And I think we are.
Road wins in conference, you can't just expect blowouts. And a close win is just as good as a blowout.
When was the last time Ohio State came to Happy Valley? And Kevin, look this up for me because I'm asking. When was the last time Ohio State came to Penn State and won by 30 points? Like a blowout. Like a 42-10. Like when's the last time Ohio State came to Penn State? Because I'm thinking through, and I legitimately cannot think of one. I mean, they won 2 years ago, and it was a comfortable win, and it was 2 touchdowns. It was 38-23 or something like that. Before that, they won by 1 point. Before that, they lost. 2014, they went to double overtime.
Was 2015?
No, 2015.
No, was 2015 double overtime? I thought that was.
I think they there was one point where they switched and they played it in the Ohio Stadium 2 years in a row.
What's the threshold?
30 points.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think
20 points in 2007.
20.
There was a 63-14.
But that was in Columbus. There was one here, but Ohio State did not win. 20 points in 2007. So again, now we're back 15 years. I can do math. You're back 15 years. And you have a 20-point win.
One doesn't exist.
Yeah, they have not won by. Is 20 points the biggest margin of victory for Ohio State in Beaver Stadium?
On a quick look,
yeah.
I would say
Okay.
So
I have picked Ohio State. We can get into game picks if you want to.
No.
I have picked Ohio State to win 38-17. This would be the biggest margin of victory for Ohio State ever in Beaver Stadium. And you have people saying, please stop. Please, my Buckeyes, please. I mean, you can. I mean, I've seen people picking them to win 56-10, and yeah, I mean, sure, maybe there is a way that you have a game that ends that way. I just, that requires Penn State can't run the ball at all. The whole game's in Sean Clifford's hands. He starts throwing the ball. Ryan Day has an issue with James Franklin for some reason and keeps his foot on the gas pedal a little longer, or just wants to make a statement before the first college football playoff rankings. That's a possibility as well. And so, sure, and you get a couple of defensive scores, and you roll, and Penn State just kind of turtles, and it really, really snowballs on. Sure, that could happen. I just don't think that's, that. What do you give that, a 5% chance of happening, right?
Yeah, tops.
Yeah.
That's just, as you said, that requires Ryan Day to want to do a lot of that. And I think it would probably almost require 42 points in the first half, something like that. I do think you dial it back and you just get out of town, because at some point, like, that fourth quarter is not for scoring. That fourth quarter is for running the clock. And that's what coaches on the road want to do more than anything else. Like, score, yes, let's run that clock if we are leading.
Glasswing Butterfly, wonderful member of BuckeyeHuddle.com. You should become a BuckeyeHuddle.com member as well, just like Glasswing Butterfly. She says, Tom, the fashion plate.
You're really hunting for positive Tom comments right now.
I'm just scrolling through, Kevin. I can't help that there's so many positive Tom comments.
9 questions in the queue.
What is Tony
Gervais looking to pump up your ego, CU?
You are so you're pitiful. What does obviously Tony not Tony Gerdeman's burner account I have to say recently? Do we have some questions? You said we do have some questions.
We do. DB Callings, I want to see shock and awe from the beginning and leave no doubt.
I think that's fair from Ohio State fans to want to see shock and awe from the Ohio State team and leave no doubt. And this is somewhere that maybe if Ryan Day said they want to get out to an early start, get out to a fast start, and maybe that causes that. And then there's the pressure that gets put on Sean Clifford because it's like, well, now I've got to do this. I think it's possible. I just you when you're on the road like this, first time you're in this kind of environment, I think you have to expect a little bit of a slow start. Maybe if that's only 7 points in the first quarter, I think that's not that bad.
Yeah, if Ohio State is up 7-3 at the end of the first quarter, I think people are going to view that as a slow start. And it's like, no, if you're playing from ahead, you're putting, Penn State is, especially if Penn State gets the ball first and Ohio State's getting the ball the first to the start of the third quarter. If you're up 7-3 after the first quarter, that's a win. I mean, yes, of course you would like to be up 10-3, 14-3, 17-0, whatever. But it feels like there's always a little bit of a feeling out period. And we've seen with this offense, it sometimes takes a drive or two for them to get, kind of get going. And we've also seen with the Jim Knowles defense, they are substantially better after the halftime than they are before halftime. They've given up, I'm going to do this off the top of my head, it's like 28 and 36 points in the first two quarters, and then 17 and 20, and they're 17 and 24, something like that in the third and fourth quarter.
Sounds like you're making up numbers.
It's something in that range. I'm gonna give myself a margin of error of plus or minus 10, and feel pretty good about the fact that I'm going to hit it somewhere in that range. But I mean, and that has been a hallmark of Jim Knowles' defense going back to Oklahoma State last year. I think 4 of the last 5 games, they held the opponent without a touchdown in the second half. And that's just, so if you're, this is kind of the college football version of if he's even, he's leaving.
Yeah.
If Ohio State's ahead at the half, there's a pretty good chance Ohio State's going to win the game and probably pull away a little bit.
I think if Mayan Williams is healthy, I think that's going to help that opportunity for shock and awe. And maybe is Mayan Williams the shock? Is he the awe? Is Travion Henderson the shock or the awe, Tom?
Travion Henderson, I think, would be the awe, because I feel like Mayan Williams is the thunder, right? So I think the thunder is the shock, right?
Well, but
lightning is electric, which shocks you, but I feel like the shock is the impact, right?
But how often do you watch Mayan Williams and you're like, wow, wow is the awe. But also lightning makes you say, wow. And the analogies kind of get convoluted after a while when you're trying. The transitive properties of analogies don't fit. Kevin, how's it going?
Tyler, what is the ceiling of the defense if our corners show improvement on the 50-50 balls downfield?
The ceiling is pretty darn good.
The roof.
And this is going to be the best offense they have faced all season and the best all-around team they have faced all season. But it's still not an incredible team. And with as important as it feels like those deep balls, those take-a-shot deep balls are going to be for Penn State, if they're not 50-50 balls and they're 40-60 balls, and that's just one fewer, that may take, that might be enough to take the Penn State point total from 17 to 13 or 17 to 10 or 24 to 17, whatever it is. But that maybe just a little bit better might take a touchdown off the board for Penn State.
Yeah, I agree with that. Remember earlier in the week we were talking about how Ohio State doesn't really throw the 50-50 balls. I asked Julian Fleming about that. I'm like, why don't you guys throw the jump balls? And I'm like, is it because you're open? And so like you don't need to. He's like, well, I hadn't thought about that. Kind of that, and also they scheme stuff up. They scheme up this stuff, and it's like, yes, that is very much true. And other offenses like Penn State will scheme up the 50-50 ball. It's like, well, we've got to do something, so let's do this. Whereas Ohio State's offense, they're able to scheme the one-on-ones, but also a route that allows a guy to break open more. And you have guys that run those routes and, supreme athletes to do that. So there's a full combination of things that allow Ohio State to not have to rely on such a thing. And it's like the 50-50 balls is it can be a weapon for some programs and teams and offenses. And it's usually because they need it. Like it's almost an act of desperation.
Next one from D Brown. He says, "Go Blue. What's up, guys? Pains me to say, but I really like your show. 4227. Tony, is that like trucker lingo? That's like CB lingo, like 10-4, 4227.
Look, just because
just
because I know some trucker lingo, and I have BJ and the Bear on DVD at home, and I have watched many trucker movies, and I had Over the Top on VHS. I don't know all, and my aunt had a CB, and her handle was Turtle Dove. I can't just be assumed to know a bunch of stuff about trucker lingo. Good, buddy.
I'm going to take that as a yes. All right. This is from Chad Moran. He says, "Stupid question for a fan out in California. Does the team drive the 5 or 6 hours on a bus, or do they fly to State College?" My assumption is they fly. There are NCAA rules about, if a game is a certain distance away, you have to drive one way and you can fly the other way. So they'll like drive to Michigan and then fly back. They should be flying. There is an airport at State College you can fly into. And there's a very famous and apocryphal, but spiritually seems true story about Woody Hayes flying in when, I don't remember if it was snowing or if it was just a storm or something, and there were 2 planes, and they had the coaches and the first teamers on one plane, and then the backups and the equipment people on the second plane, and they the story starts to break down where the pilots are asking Woody Hayes what he wants to do, landing the plane. But as the story goes, Woody says, "Send the other plane in first, and if they make it, we'll land with the starters and the coaches." So yes, there is an airport in State College and has been for a long time.
I had never thought about that portion of it, where these professionals, these precise professionals who must do their job in exacting way, are like, "What do you think we should do, coach?"
Remember, Tony, this is a pre-9/11 world. It was a very different time to fly.
Well, and Woody Hayes was a well-read person. Who's to say he couldn't land one of those simple machines back then?
He probably played a lot of Microsoft Flight Simulator back then.
I'm sure he did. At the at the High-Lie, at the ROTC building, probably had one of each at each place.
Glasswing Butterfly wants to know, Tony, do you know the old song Convoy?
I can't sing it word for word, certainly not live. I don't want to get our live stream dinged for copyright, so I will not sing it perfectly here. But
he could.
But I could. I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, was it G.W. McCall?
I was going to say CW. Yeah, CW
yes.
McCall, I think is correct.
But that's also more of a 70s thing, more than just like, real truck driving is more country than 70s pop. But that's another show. That's our next show.
JJ says, bold prediction: Ohio State may have more passing touchdowns than rushing touchdowns, even though Penn State is bad at running defense. Is that bold? I feel like Ohio State.
Penn State has allowed 6 passing touchdowns this season.
Mm-hmm.
So they're allowing less than one a game, Tom. So by my math, if they but this is one of those where you would try to say this is a bold prediction, but it would be like, but they do this every game. Ohio State always throws for more touchdowns than they run for, except for the couple times they haven't.
Kevin just put on the screen that I need to read the questions that are on the screen. So therefore, this is Kevin's fault that I'm reading this one. Thomas Clark wants, Kevin, if you're willing, can you tell Tony I'm going to a steakhouse tonight where I will not be putting ketchup on my steak? Tony, you're going to a steakhouse tonight. We're doing a hungry huddle episode at the steakhouse tonight. Are you excited, or are you already pre-annoyed at what Kevin is going to do in the episode?
I'm always pre-annoyed by what Kevin's going to do. That's regardless of any episode of anything. I'm pre-annoyed before this show. I was pre-annoyed before the last show. I was pre-annoyed before the drive. But no, I'm totally fine with going to a steakhouse. I have some pre-made chicken tenders in my bag, so I'll have those with me, and hopefully they have some A1 sauce or some ketchup there, and we'll be fine. But yeah, I'm looking forward to a steak place. I've been told it's not the best steak place, but as good as Kevin could get us into.
Still better than you deserve.
It is Bedford, Pennsylvania.
All right.
How dare you,
Next
sir.
one from Sports and Things. I think it is 31-24 at the end of the third quarter, and OSU gets 2 late touchdowns to cover 45-24, but we will sweat. Good to see you. That's
pretty high scoring.
That would I could see shave a touchdown off of both of those. And well, I say that, and that's pretty much exactly what I picked. So yes, but
you were almost right, sir.
Yeah.
If you just guessed exactly what Tom said,
yes, yeah. But to me, if the game plays out that way, it's 24-17 after 3 quarters, and then it ends up 38-17. 45. I mean, what's the over under on the game? Is it high 50s, 60? I mean,
Kevin will look.
45-24 would be a lot of points. For this game
that
to
would be
me.
the over for sure.
Yeah.
24 through 3 quarters feels like a lot for an Ohio State defense.
Yeah, 61. 61. So yeah, I mean, you'd be hitting the over by 8 points, which isn't outrageous.
No, it's not.
But
no, and we've seen Ohio State hit the over all by themselves at times, so they're getting. Penn State would have some help there.
Yes. Yep. Captain Banana Peel. We got some great names.
Yes.
In there. People are overblowing the Iowa game. Iowa was one of the best rush defenses in football and was uncharacteristically gambling to stop the run.
Yeah, no, they were focused on the run, and it worked. And also, Ohio State made some mistakes, and they've owned those, and they've talked about them, and they've addressed them, and feel like they've fixed them. So it's just a matter of this week of seeing what new wrinkle that Penn State has for them and adjust to that. And that was something we talked to Ryan Day about on Tuesday, about how you do all of this film work leading up to a game, and it's all in this box, and yet what they end up doing is somewhere over in this box, and like the 2 boxes never meet, but you have to prepare for those contingencies as well. He said that's what he does, like from the last 48 hours of the game, is trying to figure out the contingencies and just thinking about that. Calls it chasing ghosts, and I wrote about that today on Buckeye Huddle, so you can go check that out. But he's like, yeah, I'm chasing ghosts like the last 2 days, trying to figure out all of these contingencies. And he said the times you don't chase the ghosts, and you regret it because they show up. And so it doesn't matter if you're spinning your wheels, you're wasting time. It tends to work out for you. That it's better than to have it and not need it than to not have it and need it. And that's what he's talking about with just those contingencies, working on that in the last couple of days before a game.
Well, it's like studying for a test. You can feel like you've studied as much as you need to, and just go ahead. If you put in that extra hour on the last night, that'll be what Don't just assume. Well, they're not going to do that because if it's inconvenient. Jordan Kapler wants to know who can throw a peanut butter and jelly sandwich further, CJ Stroud or James Franklin? Does he? It says CJ or Franklin. So.
It's Jordan. So, I mean,
okay, yeah. James, it could be James Franklin, or we can do
or
Ben Franklin. We're in Pennsylvania.
Well, I mean, that's a forefather, so you show some respect right there. I'm sure that dude could throw something. But how about let's do it this way?
It's
James Franklin. Okay.
Obviously, CJ Stroud can throw further. But what if you allow James Franklin to ball up his sandwich, and CJ Stroud has to keep his as a sandwich? I think the ball will go further. Unless, Tom, do you throw the sandwich the Frisbee form?
Frisbee style. 100%.
Does that then go further than the ball? I think
I'm thinking now. I have a Australian cattle dog, so I have thrown a lot of frisbees over the last 4 years or so.
I am a frolfer.
I know exactly what that means, and it's still a funny word.
Now I want to find this out.
If it is CJ Stroud throwing if you just throw a sandwich like in your hand without balling it up, it's just going to go to pieces.
Right.
It's going to be like
it's
throwing
peanut butter and jelly, though.
Yeah, it's still.
Marmalade.
I mean,
I don't know what marmalade.
You know what marmalade is?
I don't know what that has to do with a sandwich.
Well, I mean, somebody has to.
It's like a jelly.
It's like
if it's
jelly.
crunchy or smooth, I mean,
Please stop derailing the show. We're talking about whether you could throw a peanut butter and jelly sandwich further by balling it up or by just keeping it as a sandwich.
I don't know why he doesn't take these shows seriously. So anyway, Tony, first of all, we got to talk about the viscosity of peanut butter and jelly. And, is this a jam or a jelly? Because he just said PB&J. Now, that could be a jam or a jelly.
I think it's interchangeable.
Well,
dealer's choice.
Here's where you're wrong, my friend.
Oh.
Not so fast, my friend. With a jam, you've got the pieces of the chunked up fruit in there. I think that does help keep it together a little more than just the jelly, which is just like your old school grape jelly kind of out of the jar.
But does it if you have crunchy peanut butter, do you need the jam?
Well, you have to because Jordan stipulated in the question that the jam.
No, I'm saying could you go with jelly?
More details.
I think jam is probably the better answer. But I think once you ball it up, it doesn't matter.
Yes, once you ball it up, I think I could. If I balled up a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I think I could throw a peanut butter and jelly sandwich at least 12 to 15 yards. At least.
I really feel like we need to figure this out and do this.
And it might be I
think I could throw it 20 yards.
Well, I might be wildly under. I'm saying like 100% confidence I could throw it 12 to 15 yards. I'm just like putting myself on a baseball field and thinking, could I, for a softball field, could I stand at home plate and throw a balled up peanut butter and jelly sandwich to first base? Because that's 60 feet.
Could you throw the runner out at second with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Well, and that's like 90 on a.
Because if you whip that like frisbee style, it's gonna go crazy.
I think, and I don't want to rush through this, but I think we need to come to a conclusion. And I think head up, straight on, you have to give CJ Stroud a significant advantage. James Franklin throwing a balled up sandwich versus CJ Stroud, either frisbee style or just regular throw. I think I'm going with Franklin on that one. I think physics is going to win the day.
Tom, if you could do me the most hugest favor ever, when you are in that Penn State postgame tomorrow,
especially if Penn State has lost and James Franklin is extremely salty.
If it's like a 52-3 ending, if you could be like, Coach Franklin, tough game, I know that, but it's just one quick question. If you had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and you were in a throwing contest with CJ Stroud from Ohio State, you just saw him threw 7 touchdowns, looked very good. Do you think you could throw a peanut butter and jelly sandwich further than him if you balled up a sandwich and CJ was not allowed to ball up his sandwich?
Tony, let me tell you something. I would do that for a $25,000 super chat. Now, I don't know if you can legally do a $25,000 super chat.
Now, does that mean also if the score is 52-3?
Yes, also that. Yes. Okay. I'm never let it be said I'm not willing to do anything for the listeners. I will do whatever we can.
I love Stunt Tom Moore. This is great.
All right, next we've turned our website into Impractical Jokers. Coming up next on True TV, 5 seed versus a 12 seed in 3 months. BP, how much does the team generally keep concealed for the Michigan game?
Well, I don't know that they keep anything concealed. They just haven't put it in yet. Like Ryan Day wants to put stuff in every week. So that's 4 weeks from now. So that's the stuff that hasn't been put in has been concealed. But I also think there's some stuff that they haven't run. There's always stuff that they haven't run yet that hasn't been seen, but they've been practicing it. So they have it. Like, I'm pretty sure that throw to Jackson Smith-Njigba against Utah in the Rose Bowl, and we just refer to it as that throw anymore, was something they had practiced but never done. So you have stuff like that. And then if it's like, we've been wanting to run this, wanting to run this, that week you start thinking, well, let's finally get it out there. For one, it works in practice. For two, we haven't shown it. So there's stuff like that. I don't know that they do anything specifically in terms of we're going to work on this and save it for Michigan until actually like the week or two leading up to Michigan. And for Jim Knowles, maybe it's 3 weeks because he wants to install and then work on it for 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, and I think that people have this idea that you're working on stuff in April, and the idea is we are going to save this for the third quarter of the Michigan game. It's like that's not really how it works, because some of it also is going to depend on what look. I mean, how often do you hear people talking about, well, we didn't get the look we wanted? You know, if Michigan shows a certain look, you have something in your bag for that. I think a really interesting question, and this is one that we should save for a press conference. If only we got to ask people questions. We should do this sometime. How many plays at the end of the season have you worked on but never showed? How many at the end of the season? You know, because you're not showing everything. Because frankly, I mean, Jim Knowles has talked about the fact that even his other coaches, he has stuff in his head that he hasn't even talked to the other coaches about because he just wants to have it and just, you know, if we need it, we'll break it out. I wonder how much stuff they work on but never show. I mean, we heard, how many times did we hear about the J.K. Dobbins and Mike Weber in the backfield together, and then we never actually saw it in 2017, or we saw it once and they had a false start or something.
Yeah, I think Ryan Day has talked about you invest so much time on plays that you need to get them out. Like if you're going to spend all of this time, then they need to be used. And so I don't know how many, like I don't even know what a lot would be. I'm sure there are certainly plays that they didn't get to that they practiced and are like that's something you review after the season. Like we tried too many things in practice because we didn't get to half of them. So you got to dial it down next year or put them in play. Tom, what is the smirk?
There's so much sandwich chat going on. An Italian sub would travel the furthest in the air. Are you rubber banding a panini? Yeah, you need something that's going to stick together. Someone was talking about a Reuben earlier. Like, no, it's going to fall apart. That's
the day after. If you buy an Italian sub, a day old Italian sub will travel further than a fresh Italian sub. Like everything is congealed together into like one mass of sandwich. Whereas the minute of, that's just a bunch of components. It has not. It's like a good chili. It hasn't set yet.
What about a Monte Cristo?
What is a Monte Cristo?
It's a deep fried sandwich with powdered sugar and jelly.
Go on. I think. Well, deep frying something I think is a little bit of cheating.
It is cheating, 100%.
Yeah,
unsurprising that Kevin would try that.
Hey, have you guys thought about deep frying something? Stop, cheater.
What about gluing the sandwich together? Yeah. All right, Kevin.
What about making the 40 yards 32 yards and the 40-yard line and 38-yard line look like you run faster?
The thing I was going to
say, remind me to make the joke. Remind me to make the joke that I want to make after the podcast. Glasswing Butterfly says the Penn State mascot is horrible looking. My high school is the Cougars, and our mascot looks so much better.
I believe it.
It is. See, to me, the Penn State mascot is intentionally, like it's not meant to look like a lion. It's meant to look like a dude in a shabby chic lion costume. Like the head is the bottom of the head is like out where it's not tucked into the collar. It's not meant to look like, it's just like, it is like, this is very obviously a dude in a lion costume and not an actual lion. So to me, like you're competing in a different field here. You're not, yes, it looks terrible compared to some of the other, the Goldie Gopher costume or the Herky the Hawkeye costume. But for what it is, I think, I'm now trying to remember if it was our friend Brian Ginn or our friend Jeff Swoboda. We had a couple people over the years who used to like to take pictures with the opposing mascots.
Ginn,
I think Swoboda likes the Penn State mascot and Ginn thinks it's like a crime against humanity, but I might have that reversed. We might have to reach out to both of them and get comment. I don't want to speak for anyone else.
I feel like the Penn State mascot was designed by the Stanford mascot.
Or the Stanford band.
Yes, and it's got that same level of you're in on a joke. Or it was designed by the same people who designed like the children's Halloween costumes from like the 1920s, where there's just straight horror.
The lion doesn't have a bindle, so I'm not sure it's exactly the same thing. But someone wants to know, and now I've lost it, where we're doing this. Sue wants to know, when did this start? 5:00, Sue. We
Really
Sue,
started at 5? Holy
yes,
cow.
Sue, we
Before 5.
told everyone upwards of 3 minutes before that. So this is really on you. We did a tremendous
Very
amount of planning for this.
disappointing.
Sue, as a longtime friend of the show, throw in whatever you want. We'll talk a little longer and answer whatever questions you have.
About sandwich throwing.
All Hail Michigan says, I need to turn this show off. I hate that I love it.
Yes. Yeah.
Wayne Taylor.
We talk about things but other people are afraid to talk about.
Exactly. Sandwiches. Exactly. Sandwich physics. I mean, it is a valid field of study, Tony. As I told my parents when I tried to enroll in sandwich physics college.
Sandwich University, even though you can go to Subway.
Wayne Taylor says, can Penn State secondary handle all of our wide receivers? I'm not sure who they will have left after Marvin Harrison Jr. and Fleming and so on, then Cade Stover. I just don't see how they handle all of those weapons. I think that's a viable concern because I think they have 2 very good corners, got at least 1 very good safety. You've got some very promising. I mean, that we haven't talked about Abdul Clark at all, but I mean Carter. Sorry, Abdul Carter. Very, very impressive young linebacker. That's one that I think Ohio State might want to have back.
Well, maybe they can get him back.
Thanks, Al.
Is Tim Beckman here? Is
Yeah.
I think I have that same concern with the Penn State corners where you're very good to a certain point, and then Ohio State can stress you in ways that most offenses can't. And if you've got 3 good wide receivers and 2 good corners, CJ Stroud is smart enough to find the guy who's on the not as good corner.
I do wonder how Manny Diaz is probably telling his guys, be as physical as you need to be. If you need to grab, go ahead. They're not going to call them all. And a 15-yard penalty is much better than a 60-yard touchdown. So feel free to be as handsy as you need to be. And, as we all know, the refs give Penn State every benefit of the doubt. The Big Ten loves Penn State, and they give them all the calls. So I would expect that to continue.
The Big Ten's long-running and vast pro-Penn State conspiracy.
We've talked about it for years. Penn State fans know it.
Lynn Spreezy says, do you think Day sees all the hype that Hooker's getting? Hendon Hooker? I read this first, and I'm like, Marcus Hooker?
Who's hyping?
Yeah, all the hype that Hendon Hooker is getting and has it in the back of his head that he needs to make a statement, or do you think he truly doesn't even think about that? I think he's if you ask him, he'll tell you he doesn't even think about it. And I think he thinks about it. I think you kind of at least have to have it. This is not your primary goal.
Right.
This is I think that the reason that CJ Stroud was in the game and threw the 73-yard or whatever it was touchdown to Julian Fleming was that he wants CJ Stroud to get to give a speech in New York on the second Saturday in December.
Right in Desmond Howard's face. I think that's what the entire purpose of. Doesn't matter what happens against Michigan as long as they get to tell Desmond Howard, in your face about the comments from last year.
Obviously, Tony Gerdeman's burner account with the most hateful comment, and there's so many levels to this one.
Okay.
If Kevin were a sandwich, he'd be an impossible Whopper. There are so many levels there that I'm wondering if, I'm thinking now in my head, did Tony ever pick up his phone and start texting something?
I will now readily admit that is my account because that is fantastic.
That's how much I love this show that I'm even willing to put those posts up on the board.
Now, we do have to certify to YouTube that there is no hateful content in this show, and I'm not sure we can validly do that on this one.
Well, if the hate comes with love, it's a love-based hate.
Does it?
Yes. Yes. A Burger King burger and not even a meat burger. That is tremendous. That is, as you said, all kinds of levels. What was I saying before you interrupted me? Was it important?
I don't know. I never listened.
Next question.
I'm a big stupid man.
Yakov wants to know if we enjoy the lion roar.
We talked about this some 45 minutes ago. No, well, I mean, you start to ignore it. You start to stop hearing it. Like it's. I don't want to say it's annoying. It's just you don't need to do it all the time. And anything that you do constantly from the crowd, it can be annoying, or if they're piping it in. Now, the windows will probably be closed, so we won't hear it as much as you will on the field. So what about you, Tom?
I had really not thought about this. I looked at back-to-back road games, Penn State and Northwestern, and thought, wow, 2 weeks in a row on the road, that's going to be a lot of travel in the span of 8 days or something. I had not considered 2 weeks of extremely fake lion roar sound effects back to back. Not strictly speaking what I was looking for. No.
I just now I regret not doing the line roar the entire drive here, and really, really just make you sick of it.
And we warned people earlier, and if you're just joining us, they will do a 5-second snippet of the Lion King music, and the novelty of that wears off rather quickly, and then they keep going. It's like I don't know that a 3-yard gain on 2nd and 7 really merited a lion roar and or Lion King thing. I mean, I get it because you're the Nittany Lions and it's the Lion King.
I mean, did you hear the Iowa crowd at Ohio State cheer when they completed a pass like the first time in the second quarter? The 500 people up and
yeah, but that to me is awesome, because that to me is like when we were at Nebraska in 2017 or 19, the year that Ohio State murdered them. Okay, just kidding. It was both. There was, I think it was 17, where there's the tradition at Nebraska where they release the balloons after the first touchdown of the game. And it got to about the midpoint of the second quarter, and Nebraska got the first down of the game. And there was just a sea of balloons that went up. Everyone was tired of holding them, and pretty sure they weren't going to get a chance to release one for the actual stated reason. So that's the Nebraska version of a Bronx cheer. And that's, I mean, I think that's like the Iowa version of a Bronx cheer, which honestly, with it being like Iowa and Nebraska, might actually be earnest. Like, hooray, you fellas did it. Good for you.
Completed pass. That's a reason to cheer for an Iowa fan.
Siknayog says, I suggest a segment devoted to bashing the opposing team's mascot for every pregame.
Well, this is the problem that I have. I think everybody in the Big Ten should have a mascot. Michigan doesn't have a mascot. Who else doesn't have?
Indiana does not have a mascot.
Yeah, they're the Hoosiers. They don't need one. They're no good. But I think everybody should have a mascot. And I just think at this point, Michigan, we've never had one. We don't need one. What would one even look like? I think.
What even is a Wolverine, Tony?
Exactly.
I mean,
and you have the same problem with the Hoosier. Like, what's a Hoosier? Like, when you don't know what these things are, it's hard to do a mascot of them.
And Illinois, I don't think, has a mascot anymore. They used to, and
you
gestures vaguely.
Cheap Illini Wick.
Purdue has. They don't have.
Purdue
they do.
Pete.
Purdue Pete. Yeah. Wisconsin has Bucky. Minnesota has Goldie.
Does Northwestern
has Willie the Wildcat.
Yeah. No, I think that's Kansas State's.
No.
I think he just travels. He commutes.
Kansas State has the aberration of the plush head and the flesh arm.
Yes. That's. Yeah, Willie the Wildcat, I think I'm taking. Well, I don't know. Now I'm thinking about the Kansas State mascot waving the Ron Prince power towel. And I'm like, well, actually, that's actually fantastic.
Maryland, they do it. Yeah.
Yes, Testudo. Yes. Now I'm haunted by the amount of brain space that is filled with Big Ten mascot names. Not just what their mascots are, but
there's
the
room
name
for two more.
There's
what
Nebraska has Herbie.
What is the inflatable one?
And the inflatable one, which is actually the better one.
What is the Rutgers? What is his name?
Nitro, I think. Is it Nitro? Or is that UCF? That might be UCF. UCF. I think it's just the Knight. I think it is just. Double check me, Kevin, but I think it is just the Knight, which is.
They couldn't even bother to name him like Nick at Night, like something like what are we going to call him? I don't know. The Knight. Just get out of my office.
Sir Henry. All right. Oh, you know why? Do you want to know the story behind the naming of Rutgers University?
Nobody wants to.
So
Henry Trudeau?
Rutgers University was originally known as Queens College. I'm going to do this all off the top of my head, and 97% of it's going to be great. This is fantastic. And you thought the sandwich segment was going to be the dumbest thing we did.
That was the best thing in the show by far.
Rutgers University was originally known as Queens College. And they, in the 40s, but give or take, stop checking your watch. I can see you. They were having some financial troubles. And Henry Rutgers, who was a former Civil War or War of 1812, something or other, general, corporal, whatever, wealthy local person, they were hoping he would bail them out and give them some money in his will. So they named the college after him. So it went from Queens College to Rutgers in honor of Henry Rutgers. And then guess what, Tony? Rutgers took an L. Henry Rutgers did not leave them any money in his will, but it's still Rutgers University to this day. Go ahead and Wikipedia Henry Rutgers. I'm sure I have 90-something% of that story true or accurate and correct, but anytime I can get a chance to share the Henry
Yeah.
Rutgers story is always a good day.
So what's the name of the mascot?
Sir Henry.
Why is that?
I think we're done here.
I think
Yeah, the battery says we're about done.
we're done. We're done. All right, fantastic. That is awesome. Thank you all for joining us on a random Friday at 5 p.m. as you guys have. That's awesome of you. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for treating the Michigan fans in the chat with respect that they have earned and that they deserve, either or. That will do it for today. As always, please check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Look into becoming a member and then become a member. And if you're watching us right now on YouTube, if you could go ahead and hit that thumbs up and like this video. And then also, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. You're going to hit the bell, get notified when we drop videos. When we go live, right as you're trying to leave for work, then we keep you at work for another hour and a half, because why would you go home when you could stay here? And that is exactly what this Fairfield Inn, the motto is. Why would you go home when you could stay here at Bedford, Pennsylvania, next to a cemetery? Anyway,
Route 416.
that'll do it for us. Thank you for joining us, and we will talk to you guys later.